Okay, so going kosher in 3 easy steps.
Handouts.
They'll give out the handouts.
Rama, R-A-M-A?
I was handed the title, so had they said going kosher in 4 easy steps, I would have to add a step. But thankfully, there were exactly 3 easy steps. And step number 1, I think, is already, most people that are going to be hearing such a class already have the inspiration. Right? Some people are inspired for different reasons. Some people are inspired to say, hey, it's what the Torah says. It's the Torah's dietary. I know someone who's going kosher now, and he's inspired to do it. But he's already in the process of implementation, which is the second step of his desire to go kosher. So the reason why people are inspired to go kosher is for many different reasons. I think that it's a mitzvah, it's a Torah's requirement, it's culturally Jewish as well. It's something that people are interested for a multitude of reasons. Either way, the second someone's inspired to do it, they have to come up with some sort of roadmap where they could follow the step by step to ensure that they do it in a proper way, that they integrate the kosher practices and the kosher way of life into their lives and actually go kosher. And the big secret here is that while the class is titled 3 Easy Steps, it doesn't say 3 Quick Steps. It's not 3 quick steps, because implementation of a kosher lifestyle from a non-kosher lifestyle should take anywhere between 1 to 2 years. That's the general time frame given. So what we're going to do today is talk not so much about inspiration, what motivates someone to go kosher, but rather implementation. How do you integrate this into your life? And lastly, perseverance. How do you deal with all the challenges that arise from the transition of a non-kosher lifestyle to a kosher lifestyle? Okay, how does that sound? Sounds good? Great. Okay, so I think it's important to know in the onset that going kosher from non-kosher is a tremendous challenge. It's difficult. And it's difficult for a few reasons. Reason number 1, I think, is that all change is difficult. If you're going to change anything about your life, the way you eat, the way you sleep, the way you work, the way you interact with people, if you want to become someone who is more patient, you want to make that change in your life, any change is difficult. But I think kosher specifically is difficult because kosher is of lifestyle. It covers many areas of your life. The way you shop, you have to change that. The way you manage your home, you have to change that. You're going to change the way you interact with guests, the way you maintain your kitchen, the way you cook. All these things are changing when you go kosher. So it's very overreaching. It's not just a specific change in one area of your life. Rather, it's a very broad change in multiple areas of your life, which adds another degree of difficulty to going kosher. We talk about the pots and the pans and the utensils and the cutlery and the dishes. Those things, I think, are while it's a lot of stuff, but it's not that hard. That's not so much of a lifestyle change, but the limitations on eating out, for example. In Houston, we don't have so many kosher restaurants. We have a lot. We don't have a ton like there are elsewhere. So that is a significant change for a lot of people. And you can't just go out to eat in the places that you're comfortable in, or that you're accustomed to. So it's a difficult thing, and I think also that if you go kosher, there's some things that you're going to have to give up. You're going to have to forfeit. There isn't a way to have your cake and eat it all, and eat it too, as they say. Right? Going kosher for someone who has spent the majority of their life or a significant portion of their life eating non-kosher and maybe becoming fond of certain non-kosher foods, they have to realize that going kosher will force them to have to make tough choices, because they'll have a conflict between these foods that they like and their new kosher life. All that being said, I think it's important to realize, and this is kind of the theme of Kosher Month, is that kosher is so much easier now than it's ever been before. We took a tour with a group of people in West Houston. So we went to people that never kept kosher in their lives. And maybe some of them did. Maybe some had more of awareness than others. But these are relatively new people to the whole idea, to the whole discussion of kosher, and we walked up and down our Whole Foods, and we picked off items off the shelf. And the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of the items were kosher. Not the entire meat section. Meat, the meat and fish, poultry section. Besides for that, packaged items, almost everything. What do you say? 70, 80%, Alex? Probably.
Crazy. Kosher shrimp?
Well,
I saw at least a dozen kosher items I've never seen before.
It's incredible, and there's such a wide array as well of
Everything.
of kosher supervisions, marks that I've never seen. All over the world, all over America, kosher is booming. Kosher is widely available. Kosher is ubiquitous. Kosher is in every supermarket in America, and kosher is much easier than it ever was before. Okay, so it's easy to do. There are some difficulties. There are some challenges. You're inspired to do it. You want to integrate it into your life. It's going to take some time, slow, gradual. We don't believe in jumping in at once, even though I would say some people could still do it. Some people could jump in at once if they have a very strong motivation, if they made this commitment, this determination, that with absolute certainty that they're in. They jump in, they're in. I kind of feel like there's some things in life that you kind of have to jump into. Like marriage. People don't say, "Oh, you know what? Let's do this gradually. Let me just test the waters. Let me dip my toe in." It's one of the themes where you have to just jump in. You have to just jump in and hope you didn't make a mistake. So the idea of all change in lifestyle necessarily being slow and gradual is not necessarily true. But I think with regards to kosher, for most people, the optimal way of doing it is slow and gradual, step by step, micro-sized bites. Don't change too much too radically. Don't bite off more than you could chew. And the reason why is because the likelihood of you succeeding is greatly increased if it's done slowly and gradually. If you do it all at once, it's like a diet. You want to change your diet all at once. So you spend 2 or 3 days and you're fighting, you're successful. Then the third day you go on the binge.
It is a diet.
It is a diet, I understand. Well, it's a good way to describe it. It's a diet. You want to change your diet. If you try to change it radically from being a junk food binger to someone who just eats green leafy vegetables, it's not going to be easy. It's not. And because it's so painful. It's such a conflict. And the greater the conflict, the lower the likelihood of success. But if this is a minor conflict, and you can keep on that going for a long time, it's likely to succeed. We have I always say this over from Rav Dessler. He said that Rabbi Dessler of England, the great rabbi who died in 1954, he said that he compared the idea of change to a spring. Right? You're facing pressure, and it's like you're pushing a spring. If you push it too hard, there's the risk of backlash. You try to do too much at once. You try to climb the mountain without taking a break, without having things settle. It's likely it's going to backlash, and not only will you not accomplish that you set out to accomplish, but in all likelihood you'll regress, even beyond the starting point. So I think it's a good rule of thumb to talk about a slow integration. So I have over here a handout. Let's give out the handouts. This I copied from the book Kosher for the Clueless but Curious. So they have a chapter on.
Starts from the bottom, not the top of the page.
Yeah, they have a chapter on the 6 steps. They call it 6 steps of one step at a time approach to integrate kosher in your life. So start from the bottom. Number 1, the decision. So someone decides that I'm going to experiment keeping kosher. I'm committed to eventually keeping kosher. I have a student in Kingwood. We met him when we spoke. I spoke at a temple, Beth Torah, about a week and a half ago. Was it a week and a half ago? And he was one of my students there, and him and his wife decided to go kosher. But their plan, their path is very similar to this. They're gradually weaning themselves off some non-kosher foods, gradually adopting a more kosher consumer outlook, and slowly integrating the kosher diet. It's very smart. because they will probably be successful. I'm talking about turning over their kitchen, and but those things all take some time. Okay, so someone decides, and I think that maybe I would add something here. After you decide, I think it's important to get some education. You have to learn the basics of kosher. I don't know, it doesn't include that here. You have to learn what kosher is from, what the sources say, what's the rationale behind it. I think it's important to also understand maybe some of the deeper insights. If you're going to adopt something in your life, right, you want to make sure you understand it as best possible. For me, I grew up in a kosher family. I always had kosher. To me, it's just the way of life. I don't know anything else. But assuming if I had grown up in a different kind of society or family background, and if I would have made such a radical change, it's a big deal for me. So I want to make sure that you understand it. You want to make sure you understand it. You have to understand why you're doing it. And kosher, while the primary reason we always say is because that's what the Torah says, it's the Torah's diet. It's the Jewish people's diet. It's just the way it is. Accept it. Take it or leave it. Still, there are deep, tremendously deep insights as well. And I know this book, for one, has a little bit of the Kabbalistic perspective. There are reasons it's important to educate yourself not only on the laws, their sources, but also on the Kabbalistic and to give yourself a flavor to the activities. Don't just do it because that's just the way it is. But I think the likelihood of success will significantly increase when someone has the attitude or the understanding of, I'm doing this because I have to do it, but I also want to do it because I understand much more of the deeper, maybe perhaps even mysterious and hidden meanings behind what I'm doing. So you make the decision, you decide to go kosher, you get some education in the laws, educated in the spirit of the law, the reasonings, the sources. Stage 2, you begin really slowly. What would the first thing that they would suggest to you to do? You eliminate one non-kosher food item from your diet. So you say, if I have 10 or 20 different items in my diet which are non-kosher, which is very unlikely because it's almost hard to find 20 non-kosher items. But let's say someone likes lots of different shellfish. So eliminate one of them. Or someone likes certain, pork or certain this or certain that or certain mixtures of milk. One thing. You can live without one thing. If someone told me, I'll give you $1 million if you stop eating pizza for the rest of your life, I might have to consider it. But we can survive without pizza. There's other alternatives. There's always alternatives. We want to get used to, self-control and the ability to tell yourself, no, I'm not doing this. I think it's a good thing in every other area of life. If a person is just beholden to the whims and the wills of what his body wants, they probably have much bigger issues to worry about than just kosher. Willpower, we're talking about willpower, the people that have the ability to harness their God-given talent and energy and the potential to do great things in life, they always come into a conflict between the soul and the body. There's always a conflict in the soul and body. Right? Your body says, I want to be stationary, I want to be lazy, I want to stay where I am, I want to stay in bed, and your soul says, I want to be driven, I want to accomplish, I want to do something great. There's always going to be that conflict. And the person who has willpower lifts the person to reach that, to have that ability to persevere, to be successful, to have the wherewithal to be successful in that decision. So it's a good thing to have anyhow. It's a good thing to not always say, oh, I need a drink, I'm out. Oh, I need to eat something, I'm out. Oh, I need to smoke a cigarette. Okay, I'm smoking a cigarette. Oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, let's change the channel. It's a good thing to learn to tell yourself, no, I'm not doing it. And you might say, oh, I need it, I want it, right? But when you refrain, when you abstain from doing something that you want to do, right? You realize that it's actually not you wanting it to do, it's your body wanting to do it. And that's a good thing to have a little bit more of the decision-making power in your mind's control and not your body's control. So You eliminate one non-kosher food, and you start looking for kosher symbols on packaged food items. And when you're ready, eliminate another non-kosher food item from your diet. Point is, we want minimal pain. We want a little bit of pain because there's always going to be pain. It's always going to be difficult. A little bit of pain, that's all right. That you can withstand. If you in one day you change your diet overnight, you're probably not going to be that successful. You might be able to hold out for 2 or 3 days, but you'll revert back to your old eating patterns. If you eliminate one item, maybe 2 items after a month or 2, that you could do no sweat. Stage 3. Familiarize yourself with a kosher butcher in your city and the kosher section of your local grocery. So now we're getting a little bit more to the core buying habits of the kosher consumer. You start saying, okay, the kosher consumers shop differently than non-kosher consumers. Where is the meat sections? Where do they buy meat? Oh, they buy meat here. Oh, there's a kosher meat section in Randall's and Kroger and Belden's. Right? And there's the kosher chicken section in Costco. And there's a kosher meat here and a kosher meat there. Right? Familiarize yourself. How do kosher consumers shop? You have to learn things that kosher consumers do because... I'm sorry?
That's what kosher guide's here for.
We have a kosher guy here as well, which is going to deal with.
That's what he does.
Number 2, you eliminate non-kosher meat from your diet. This could be a big deal, but really it isn't, because almost everything that you want to eat is kosher. Right? It might be a little bit more expensive, maybe 20-30% more expensive because it's kosher.
Of what can be kosher in the supermarket, generally 4 out of 5 options are ketchup, peanut butter.
Right, but here he's talking about meat. He's talking about meat. And yeah, so the non-kosher beef and the kosher beef is the same beef. One of them is kosher, one of them is not kosher.
Over the year, per person, it'll cost you a couple $100.
So it's nominal, no big deal.
Major change to the meat.
And another good advice there in parentheses: you could begin only at home and later stop eating non-kosher meat even away from home. So it doesn't have to be entirely. I mean, it's a much bigger deal if you're. To keep kosher in a foreign city or outside of the home is a much more difficult thing. Maybe introduce that at a later stage.
We were in Spain and Barcelona, and all we could eat was basically even a Mars bar is not kosher in Spain. You could have Coke, but literally.
My dad, when he was in Diamonds, he was in India.
There's no hashkacha there, or
well, partly there's no demand really. There is some kosher restaurants in certain cities. Milan and Barcelona had one restaurant that was only open for lunch. But there just is no checks on anything, and so they change the recipes. Even Coca-Cola changes the recipe. You know that city on city, country on country.
Yeah,
they use different in England. Coke in England tastes different.
Yeah, if you go to the Coke Museum in Atlanta, you could taste Coke from every different part of the world.
Really, that's so cool. And are they all kosher?
Well, I think in the I'm sure in the museum it's kosher. That's what the headquarters of Coca-Cola is. But like for example, they said that in because they test to see what the local palate likes. So, like in the Middle East, for example, it's very sweet because they like sweet. Certain Arabian countries, it's a hint of bitterness.
It's like certain countries they just drink Pepsi, not Coke.
Yeah, they have like a bunch of you just say, okay, one South Africa, one Vietnamese on it, and then they have huge bathrooms.
And they all just sitting there drinking bottles as well because the culture.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Our bottles different to yours.
I have a question before you move on. So what do you do when you travel in a country in which there are no kosher restaurants?
Yeah, so this is a huge challenge. It's a huge. I tell my dad was in India. He used to bring when he went there for business for maybe 4 or 5 days. He would bring with him canned food, from the States.
But you can get whole raw fish.
Yeah, so there are workarounds, but it's sometimes it's a combination of being stimpy on what you're eating. Number one, number two, planning beforehand. Once the kosher consumer, once this is already integrated, that's the way they think. You don't have to realign yourself. You don't have to have this recalibration and say, wait a minute, how do I have food? Right? The first thing you think about is, wait a minute, I'm going to a place that probably won't be any kosher food. What do I do about that?
You can live on fruit and veg for a week.
You could.
And fruit juices, 100% fresh squeeze, if they're squeezing on the side of the street or whatever.
That's correct. But
fish is easy.
Okay, so it's a combination of, number one, being limited to a small amount of foods, and that's why it's important to have the education to know what you can eat, what maybe you could find in some foreign places, some kosher certifications, what you can eat without a certification, and what you could bring with you. So it's a combination of education and being snippy what you're going to eat because you'll be limited, obviously, and number three, bringing along stuff, packing, right, planning.
Is kosher all over the world.
So you could just throw an ice cream.
Just the cones. You can eat on the cones, like the 3 meals a day, just cones. Not the toppings.
I'm sure the people that have done that.
In Spain, you can eat Haagen-Dazs. That's all we ate. I'm telling you, just
It's a
vegetables
disaster.
and we took tins of tuna, and we took pitas from Nico's Pitas last few days. And that was pretty much it. But you can, if you take your own knife, you pick up a knife in the supermarket, you go to any place where they have whole fish, and these countries all sell whole fish in the supermarket.
Yeah.
It's not like America.
Yeah, but
And they cut
someone
it
like
traveling
me,
with a knife.
someone like me doesn't have. Yeah,
in Europe, you travel with a knife. There's no guns.
someone like me who doesn't.
You need an apartment with a kitchen.
What do you mean? You go into the store, let's say a supermarket, you bring your knife that you can even buy in the supermarket at $2 while you're there. You ask them, can you fillet the fish for me, and then wrap it up in front of you. So they're using a clean kosher knife, they just fillet the fish, they wrap it up for you, take it home, you throw it on the disposable grill, buy a
Can't
grill
ask
from
them
wherever.
just to wash it off in cold water.
Sorry?
Can't ask them just
No,
to
you
wash
can't
it.
use a trafe knife. We have it, there's reasons why. But they don't use trafe knife.
The buying a knife shouldn't be the biggest of deals.
No, it's not because you
Yeah.
eat first in the same store. So you can keep that knife for the rest of your vacation. It's not illegal to carry a knife. Oh, it can be in certain countries.
More than 4 inches in the United States. Okay, so you eliminate non-kosher meat, you replace it with kosher meat, eliminate non-kosher seafood, replace it with kosher seafood, try various pastries of your local kosher bakery. Once again, you're trying to become more and more familiar with the purchasing habits and eating habits of a kosher consumer.
Just one other thing also. Before we plan any family trip, if we're going to pick a destination, we're on the computer looking to see what's available there kosher. Obviously, we can go into most grocery stores and find all kinds of kosher stuff. But, we don't plan a trip without knowing what's there, what restaurants are there. If we have to go in and we're going to spend the weekend in a hotel, we get our car, we go straight to the store and stock up, and then we go to the hotel room, put everything in the refrigerator. So you plan those extra steps in before you travel. Like you said, you do your work before you leave. You don't wait to get there to find out.
And a lot of places, like if you go to any major city in America, there's kosher restaurants, right? Is it
Internationally, it's more of a problem.
right?
Yeah.
Right. That's true. But in the United States, it's like, is there any? Do you think of any big city doesn't have kosher restaurant?
Every Walmart has 50%.
Say about kosher restaurant.
Yeah, there's cities.
You learn to make.
Nebraska.
Once you make
Big cities, any big city in
once you
America.
make the decision, and you've met all.
I'm sure Omaha has some
Right,
Chabad house that has some kosher.
And you
Yeah.
like I can live on tuna fish for a couple days, or I can live on whatever. And
A vegan diet is pretty much inherently
Right.
kosher, so vegans do it somehow. Now, grain is the only thing that you can't just pick up any grains anywhere you go. Are there any grains that you can do yourself without having to bake it with a proper baker?
What do you
All flours
just
inherently
just
kosher.
about any store.
Yeah.
All flours inherently kosher. So if you go to a store, even when you're in the middle of Vietnam, you get a bag of flour, you get some clean water, and then you have to kosher the oven. You have to self-clean the oven.
Yeah,
That's it.
it might be a bigger deal to find clean water.
That's why I say clean water. But generally, first world countries will have kosher options. It's third world,
Yeah.
which world? Thailand. Probably not going to find much. Oh, there's a kosher
There's
restaurant in
Chabad.
Thailand.
There's a
Oh,
Chabad.
there is. Shanghai has tons of kosher. A lot of crazy. Australia has tons of kosher. Holy Europe.
It's not necessarily third world, because I was in Italy and they put pork in everything, basically.
Italy has a lot of kosher
Yeah.
restaurants.
Depends what part.
Yeah, you have to be in the capitals generally. But if you're doing a whole trip touring a country, when you stop in the main cities, you stop at the rest.
You eat twice because you ain't eating tomorrow.
It's healthy being forced to eat fruit and veg for a week, and packet ice cream that you can see the hash from.
Are there exceptions?
Peanut butter everywhere.
They bring stuff from America, mind you. They have supermarkets. The big supermarkets have an America section because there's a lot of expatriates and whatever. Patriots, what do you guys say?
Patriots.
And so they have like
No, they
we
say
have English
Patriots.
sections. Have you noticed how the supermarkets have a little English section with all our biscuits and our tea, and it's a fortune because they're bringing it from England. But that's for people like me who need the good quality chocolate. We don't have Hershey's in England. There's nothing Hershey's in England. They wouldn't let it in. They said this is below quality level. This does not meet our taste standards. True story.
Okay, stage 4. You're getting a little bit more serious. Right? Stop eating meat and dairy at the same meal. That's a big one. Right? You're trying to develop in your mind this major separation between milk and meat. When you're ready, begin waiting an hour or two after eating meat until dairy. It means separation of milk and meat is not only for consuming them together, it's consuming them in the same meal, even in the same table, unless you make some sort of differentiation sign. Additionally, there's the weight. The weight between after consumption of meat, don't eat dairy for a little bit.
If your ancestors weren't kosher, so you have no idea what your tradition is,
You take where they came from. Doesn't matter what.
It goes by where they came from.
So yes.
Whether they're 1, 3, or 5, or 6.
Yeah, if they're German, Lithuanian, anywhere in North Africa, if they're from Arabia, anywhere, from Persia, you just follow whatever the tradition is of that. Because these traditions go back hundreds of years, way before kosher, way before Jews in Mas decided to abandon Jewish laws, amongst them the ritualistic laws of kosher. So these traditions are much more deep-seated than the particular decisions of the forebearers of said person. Okay, what I'm saying is that your subject who says he doesn't know his grandparents didn't keep kosher, well, his great-great-grandparents did. And their communities had a custom, and that's the custom that he adopts.
Everyone Jewish today who's still Jewish, at some point their ancestors were religious.
Of course.
Has to be.
Of course. The whole idea of a non-religious Jew is a relatively new thing. It's 200 years old.
Well, that's it.
It's 200 years old. It's the emancipation, right?
The Enlightenment.
The Enlightenment, the emancipation of Jews from Europe, that's the first time. Well, there were always some individuals, but the idea of a Jewish community abandoning practice of Judaism is a relatively new thing.
Without being forced to, you mean? Not like the Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah, not like the Moranos or the Conversos or those people.
The voluntary.
Yes, that's brand new, literally brand new. It's the 19th century. That's all it is. You don't have it anywhere else. It's not documented. Well, maybe you could say the different schisms, the different sectarian groups that existed at the time of the first century of the Common Era, like the Essenes and the Dead Sea sect and the Sadducees. To a certain degree, those people had a group. But remember, some of these people, well, some of them were huge. The Karaites in the 9th century were very big. The Sadducees in 200 years before the Common Era, but really reaching a crescendo during the time of first century before Common Era, first century after the Common Era, second century, third century, huge, like a quarter, a third of the Jewish people, Sadducees.
What did they change?
Well, they rejected all of oral Torah, So in some areas they were more stringent. Like, for example, they didn't have any warm foods on Shabbat. It's a famous example.
No warm food on Shabbat.
That's why every Jewish family has chamin or chalent on Shabbos, because it's a sign that when the Torah says not to kindle a fire on Shabbat, it means not to kindle a new fire. But if you have a fire from before Shabbat, you can keep the food warm, and that's not a problem. And we're trying to show the Sadducees, non-existent Sadducees, or the Yevusim, which history doesn't really tell us much about, but in Jewish sources are put, in very close parallel terms to the Sadducees. These people said we're not there's even a couple of them left, I think. The Samaritans. Well, Samaritans weren't really Jews. Anyhow, we're getting into the history lesson.
A good Samaritan. What about good?
Begin buying 5 or 6 types of products with a kosher symbol. Become more aware. It's all becoming more aware and changing your mindset. This takes, I would say, a couple of months. You start looking at packages, examining for the labels. For example, to give an example, only purchase tuna, pasta, coffee, ice cream, and olives with a hechsher.
Coffee does not need a hechsher.
Coffee does not need a hechsher. I guess even if it's ground.
Because they roast it the same way across the world.
Even if it's flavored.
No, not flavored.
Unflavored.
Most people have unflavored coffee. 90% of coffee is unflavored.
Yeah, and the rest of it's disaster.
No, you can be good.
I hate French vanilla. Ooh.
Someone gave me a bag of raspberry coffee.
Oh my gosh, that's a crime.
Coffee has.
I made the first cup. I poured it out because I thought it had like detergent in the cup. I'm like,
We have fantastic pecan coffee by Cat's Coffee.
This
Just
was
a
Cat's
quick plug for Cat's Coffee.
Yeah, but coffee innately has so much flavor that it doesn't need to, you don't need to artificially add flavor to coffee. It's a mistake. Anyhow, so like a fish, stage 5, begin purchasing only kosher food for your home. Eliminate all but one favorite non-kosher restaurant. Once again, we don't want to push it too hard, too fast. And seriously consider koshering your kitchen. And the summit, the top of the line, is someone's ready to kosher their home. Discuss it with the rabbi means go for it. You go all in.
What is safe to eat in a non-kosher restaurant?
Okay, so that's a good point. So we see a little bit about the progression. This is all about stage 2. You have the inspiration. You're into the implementation stage. As you're implementing different areas, so this is all in a vacuum. But in other areas of your life, you're going to be faced with certain challenges that you need to be prepared for. For example, Alex says, "What about your non-kosher restaurant?
What can I go in and still order?"
Yeah, and this is a very practical question because if someone's having a business meeting or a lunch meeting, professional meeting, they're usually done in restaurants.
Yeah, my wife has it all the time.
And what does she do?
Week. Oh, she orders the shrimp and doesn't tell anyone.
Okay, he's making a joke, but
Kidding.
what do you do when you have a professional? So there are some workarounds to that. For example, you could just say I'm ordering, fruit and Coke. For example, I just cut up some fruit, give me some Coca-Cola, good to go. Another thing, you could meet in a kosher restaurant. We have some decent kosher restaurants here in Houston. If you're in a bigger city, there's no problem. If you're in New York City, there's no problem. There's more kosher restaurants than not kosher restaurants. There's just a plethora of kosher restaurants in New York City. But it's also important, you can be honest about this. It's not like you have a disease if you keep kosher. You can say, listen, communicate with people. I can only consume kosher food as a result of my religion. I think in Houston, you shouldn't have any problems. Vegans, I understand, but
so it's okay for them to say we're vegans. So what's the difference?
That's correct. But even in Houston, in our time and place in the world, and where we are exactly in the Bible Belt, people are very, very receptive to the idea of a Jew who keeps Jewish law saying, I don't eat non-kosher food. And can we meet in a kosher restaurant? Or can we meet, or just, I'm not going to order because I can't order.
Go to Starbucks and have coffee.
Or let's go to Starbucks and have coffee. Exactly. So that's a very good question that Alex brought up. And this is a common thing. This is what I call the last stage. It's the implementation, and then there's the perseverance, dealing with the challenges. Another challenge, for example, what do you do with some, your grandmother invites you to your house? What are you going to do then? You can't compromise. If you're kosher, you can't consume non-kosher food, even if your grandmother.
I have that with Florence. She wants us to come over and try her. She's 86. Her Swedish meatballs. So we can't eat in her kitchen because she cooks bacon and her stuff all the time. So she comes to our house and she brings the ingredients, and I look at all this stuff she brought in, and I say, okay, go ahead, use my kitchen.
Last week. Was it last week or was it 2 weeks ago? For Friday night dinner, Shabbat. We had a Shabbaton. And there's this guy who comes to one of our classes. He's in Beth El, in the Reformed congregation in Missouri City. And he makes a wicked chopped liver. So he went and said, I want to make chopped liver for this Shabbaton, for this Shabbat party. I said, wonderful. Come over to the house. He came over to the house. He made his chopped liver in the kosher home, using only kosher items, kosher ingredients, kosher equipment. And he's able to make the food, in a kosher environment. This is just the kind of things that the kosher consumer is aware of and understands how to avoid these challenges. And, it's also important, like you said, the more you know about kosher, the easier it is for you to work around it. You say, oh, Grandma, you want to make food in your house? Sure. Can I buy the ingredients? Sure. Can we use maybe disposable pots and pans? Or, or can maybe you let me put the oven on a self-clean cycle and, use plasticware? Sure. What should be a problem with that? It doesn't have to be a conflict. There's other issues. There's bigger issues in life to fight over than whether or not you do an hour-long self-cleaning cycle. I personally, I encounter issues as well. I've been keeping kosher my whole life, but I was once making schnitzel for my family, breaded chicken, and frying chicken. My wife was out. She took the kids to the park, and I'm making schnitzel, flipping, and she watched and she's like, "What are you doing? You're using a milky pan for schnitzel, for poultry, for meat." So what do? This is even me, because it looks the same. The pans to me they look. I didn't for a second think I was using the wrong pan. I must have just picked the wrong pan. And my wife is obviously she's much more attuned to what goes on in the kitchen, so she freaked out. So what I do, I called up. I have a friend, one of my colleagues, who I went to rabbi school with, and he's an expert in kosher. I called him up. What do I do? What do I do with the chicken? Is the chicken kosher or not? Is the pan kosher or not? Because the pan also can be affected. It's a milky pan, but it has meaty activity going on with tremendous heat. So he says, well, you should do this with the pan. The meat's fine. Right? Continue the cooking in a different pan. It's important to have an open relationship with someone you can ask questions that may arise. This is all about integrating this into your life, learning to deal with kosher, and there will be issues that arise, and that's fine. That's why they invented rabbis, to help with these problems. Starbucks is something you brought up, right? Kosher, Starbucks coffee is kosher. Unflavored coffee is kosher. Milk is kosher.
So the kosher guy, the Starbucks guy.
And the Starbucks line lands in here. But flavored tea needs to have kosher certification. Flavored coffee as well. Creamers and cream also need to have kosher certification. So the more you know about these things, you know that I could go into any Starbucks in America and get any packaged food if it has a kosher symbol in it. If it's not packaged, I probably can't eat it. But I could just order coffee from the.
What about? So I became kosher. So what about people who are my friends who are like Jewish, but I'm not sure how religious they are? How do I know if I can eat in their house or not if they invite me for a meal? Because I had this come up the other day, and I didn't know he was grilling some mad steaks. I had no idea how religious he was really. I never asked him, and it's a little uncomfortable to say to someone, "Hey, they could be." This is
why I'm sure Rabbi Gelman as well, but Rabbi Wolbe doesn't eat by anyone's house.
He doesn't eat anyone's house.
He makes a blanket rule. The rabbi enters, I don't eat by anyone's house.
Oh, so he doesn't have to offend people.
So then you don't offend people by saying, I don't know.
But what about us, practically?
I think if, you trust someone, you would let their son marry your daughter, or you let them, you trust them enough to, I don't know. That's the criteria I would probably use.
So
now, don't get too excited. I went to your house for Shabbos. Relax.
Regular kosher, no stranger seeds, no novice, no special.
Yeah, I think, the Gemara says, the Talmud says in Yevamos 76, that this is the source that any individual is believed to be assumed. Eid echad ne'eman b'isurim. It's a principle all over the Talmud. A single witness is believed with regards to matters of ritualistic law. Right? Is it kosher or is it not kosher? Why is that? Because otherwise people wouldn't be able to go to other people's house. When I go to your house, you say it's kosher, I can trust you. Now, if you don't keep any laws, well, then I can't trust you in anything. But assuming, it's kind of a fine line. You have to make a judgment call. To know who you're dealing with. Who is this person? Can I trust him to make a kosher food? A few other things, like all major domestic beers are kosher, even though they don't have kosher certification. Scotch generally is kosher. There's some more information about this. Wines need to have kosher certification. Kids is also sometimes a big deal to get them to keep kosher. As parents, you have to be skillful maneuvering your kosher adoption with your children. You want to host a party, huh?
You can trafe up your kitchen when you're not home.
That's true.
Get a DiGiorno pizza, put it in your oven.
Well, yeah, but as parents, you have to. But it's like that with anything in parenting. You have to use skill in navigating the challenges of parenting. Hosting parties in your house shouldn't be a problem. There's so much variety, so much options. You almost never encounter a problem with that. So that's it. Kosher 3 easy steps. Inspiration, you make a decision, you learn about it. Implementation, slow, gradual. We have a bit of a framework for that as well. And we talked about the various issues, the various things that come up typically. And if anyone has any questions, I'll take them now. And thank you all. I will take one of these, read them. It's got lots of information about local and national, global kosher issues.
Do you have any suggestions